Hey, and good morning to you. This is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic, and we have some incredible news coming on, and we want to discuss. The first thing we're going to discuss today is you see the screenshot up. We want to talk about Don Beyer's webinar that he did on Monday. We're going to be talking about that. I have a money quote for that. And then you got a special bonus today. John Richardson looked at the Christensen case a little bit more. He's going to be explaining that. He wrote an article about that. And so we'll get a real education, real life education on when a tax treaty can help you out. So it's pretty fascinating. So Keith is with me, and I told Keith where I want to start off here. So Keith, I'm going to play this video from Monday, and this is where I just basically lose it. This is where it's really hard for me to continue. So here it goes.
Supreme Court rulings once again affirming that person could not renounce their citizenship. Just crazy stuff.
Watch it.
Things that made no sense at all. And I'm thrilled about the resources provided by the Internal Revenue Service, but they're insufficient. I would say we did my little congressional district, which is inside the Beltway, Northern Virginia. We did it was a crazy 3,600 individual cases last year of citizens coming to us, and a plurality were about the IRS. So we're very close to the IRS taxpayer assistance, but almost none of them had to do with FATCA or FBAR or the foreign earned income exclusion or the foreign tax credit. So this is just a lot of the challenges. We found that, at least anecdotally, FATCA was one of the primary causes of divorce in Switzerland, as American wives or American husbands didn't want the U.S. government getting involved in their spouse's business.
So I want to just stop it right there, because that right there is, we have a sitting congressman explaining that people are getting divorced because of the U.S. tax code. There he is saying it right there on, publicly saying it's an admission, yes, that the U.S. tax code is causing divorce. And that it's hard for me to get any more outraged or have any more to be more stunned than that's how bad this tax code is. So Keith, are you with me on this one here? Do you see why it's sort of hard to even go forward when we know this is the truth? We have admission. And Representative Beyer was an ambassador, right, to Switzerland before. So
yes.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's nice that he has stated it publicly, certainly within the confines of Switzerland, but that certainly transcends all countries, of the terrible situation Americans overseas and even non-Americans are in as a result of the tentacle called FATCA. And I say tentacle because it is the result of the U.S. imposing its tax code outside the U.S. on tax residents of other countries. And I find it good, but there have been survey after survey after submission to Congress, collectively, individually, etc., talking about the ruinous aspect of the U.S. tax code outside the U.S. and the terrible situation with FATCA. I don't know what more needs to be said, that something needs to change because it's ruining people's lives. The U.S. is ruining people's lives around the world. I mean, I've seen that over the years that I've been working in this area. Dealing with Americans overseas, accidental Americans around the world. It's ruinous. So it's a good thing that he said it.
Yeah, right,
so
right.
Where do we go from here?
Right.
Is a rhetorical question, but a legitimate question.
Right. And I want to be clear. I'm not raging at Representative Beyer. He's telling truth.
Right.
And it seems like he's just telling the truth. And that's why we also suspect that this video will be taken down. So I uploaded it to my channel. You can find it there in entirely. You can find this video on the IRS Medic channel because, and I think it was John who said this is not going to stay up because of these admissions of what the U.S. tax code is. Now, John, you watched the entire video, and you want to share with us what you thought of it?
Well, yeah, I do want to share, I think. I want to say at the beginning, though, of my sharing that generally, I think people should be appreciative of Congressman Beyer and supportive of him. Um, Partly because of the extraordinary things that he said, including maybe we'll get to what he said at the very end. But he's all that Americans abroad have got, basically, possibly. I think Dina Titus as well, but there's really not much. And I think that it's important to distinguish the legitimate anger, extreme anger that Americans abroad feel over the system, but not draw Congressman Beyer into this, okay, as an individual. When I really think that, and I've said this before, I don't know him like on some kind of personal basis, but I've been in the room with him, et cetera. And so my sense of him is, that he is a good man who is, within the limits of his understanding of the situation. And he is understanding the effects, but he doesn't understand the root cause very well. I mean, how many people do? I think that he is committed to trying to get some changes here. Okay. That's the first general point. The second general point that I would make, because I was thinking about this morning, is that the problem of getting this change through is honestly that American culture, and I think Americans generally, I don't even think they could conceive of American citizenship without taxation. That's what it is. Okay. I mean, to them, it's one of these self-evident truths, that all men are created equal, that U.S. citizenship is tantamount to taxation. This is what they really, really think. And what the most extraordinary part of the video actually was not even the admission that FATCA is causing divorce, or where I'll talk about what he said about renunciation later. It was that Congressman Beyer is an American politician who, get this, actually can conceive of the concept of American citizenship without it being tied directly to taxation. And I've got to tell you, I think that is an extraordinary thing.
Yeah.
No, it really is. And it reminds me of, the great Napoleon Hill. He's famous for this quote. I don't know if it really came from him or not, but it was something like this. Whatever the mind can conceive of, the person can achieve. Let me see if I can get the exact quote. I didn't really do it justice here. Whatever your mind can conceive and believe, it can achieve. Now, and Congressman Beyer, what was really fascinating about this was that he could conceive. This is extraordinary for an American politician to conceive of the possibility, even the possibility of a citizenship for Americans that wasn't tantamount to taxation. That's unbelievable, okay? Conceive and believe in the possibility. He said, well, we need to move to residence based. He said that. Okay. It can achieve. So, this is actually, sometimes, in the midst of, the most horrible wreckage that you're looking at and some of the most horrible situations, there is a glimmer of hope. And that is what I think the primary message that should come from this. Okay. What is needed now, it's an educational process, is to get him to understand why there is no possible fix for citizenship taxation. It cannot be fixed. Plain and simple.
Absolutely.
And all of these things that, various people have proposed and various organizations support are making the situation worse in the long run. The time has come, if anybody can get anybody's attention on this, to go forward with an honest message that citizenship has to be severed from tax residency. And actually, Congressman Beyer's bill think it's called the Tax Simplification for America, something like that. His bill, as well-intentioned as it is, okay, is actually proof positive that there is no way to fix this through mucking around with the foreign earned income exclusion, all this stuff. So, although you can look around and see a lot of wreckage and that, and a lot of, very, very odds and ends that really just make you go ballistic. Okay. And I get angry about this too. I think what's important again is to see that we actually have an American politician, congressman, former ambassador, okay, and a Democrat. Okay. I mean, it's extraordinary that this idea could come from a Democrat, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Who can actually conceive of a United States citizenship that's not tied to taxation. And that's very important.
Well, thank you, John, for that. And that my first reaction to the Tax Simplification Act he had was, hey, look, this is a Trojan horse. It's a Trojan horse because what it does is it fixes the error that I pointed out, you pointed out with FBARs. It gets rid of because the problem with the FBAR statute as it is for the government is that it's a requirement for the U.S. Treasury to create a report for monetary accounts involving a foreign agent, not involving foreign banks. And it's very clear from it's clear if you read it, the statute. If you read the regulations tell us something different. And so when I read this, I was like, well, he's trying to fix what we know to be the error. But I think what would be the better course of action, and after seeing this, is that, okay, this actually seems like somebody's on our side. And maybe it's better to ask them, who wrote that portion of the Tax Simplification Act that amends Title 31? And maybe we can get some things there because then we could show, well, why do we want this FBAR thing? Why do we want this? How does the FBAR help anybody overseas? And who asked for it? Who's the constituency that asked to be punished if they fail to file some report? It's just something that doesn't make any sense. Nobody really would want this. So I think the better way, and this is sort of where I think I'm going to change my tune a little bit, is I think I want to support Representative Beyer, but I also want to bring his attention to say, hey, look, whoever, you probably didn't write this yourself. But let's take a look at the statute. Now, maybe we can get some sort of FBAR relief here too. While you're at it, just take a look at it. And that might be a better way to go, as just saying, hey, look, he has nothing to offer because he is the only one we have. There is nobody else. And he actually, and as you said, he actually relays, and I would say this would, as Keith would say, reality on the ground. That's the thing. And that's why his video is going to be pulled because no way do people want to talk about the actual reality. The Congress, they don't want to talk about it. They'll talk about why you should vote. Hey, look, just, and they're like, hey, here's how to vote if you're overseas, and vote for Democrats. Not that Democrats are going to help you with your tax issue, but just continue to vote for Democrats. That's usually what we see. But here, it's actually a different message that, hey, I recognize a problem, and here's a solution that I'm offering. Now, the solution has some problems with it, but this would be the time to say, hey, let's take a look at those problems, as opposed as opposed to saying he's adverse. He's actually may have an open ear. And that's basically what you're saying, correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure, yeah. It's an educational thing. But, we're not talking about, we did I think we did a podcast recently. I never remember what we've done and have not done about the whole cook bake thing, and how that really was about a definition of citizenship and not so much about taxation.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that there's a real danger. Doesn't mean you don't do it, okay, but I think one must tread carefully when expressing these issues in terms of taxation, because it's complicated on so many levels. But with Congressman Beyer, I see the possibility of opening a discussion of what U.S. citizenship actually is. Given that you've seen, some of the problems with this, and I would, suggest that groups like Democrats Abroad and I use Democrats Abroad as a proxy for all of the groups. Okay, to perhaps expand their thinking and advocacy a little bit, although include the taxation. Perhaps what does it mean, to be an American citizen? And the simple truth of the matter is that there are countries in the world with far less freedom than America. There are many citizenships in the world that are far worse than American citizenship. But the simple fact of the matter is that American citizenship is nowhere near sort of the gold standard for what citizenship should be. It is more in the 21st century a source of clear disability and closing doors for opportunities than it is for the creation of opportunity. Now, to be sure, there are many American politicians who will think that's just fine,
Mm.
right? Because they just see this, from the point of view of being in the United States, and they have no possibility of even understanding this. I mean, going back to the conversation yesterday about the whole Moore thing and the people supporting the U.S. government. I mean, it's not so much that they're evil; it's that they can't even understand, what the practical implications of anything they're talking about, right? So anyway, I know there was a lot of negativity towards the Beyer thing, but I actually think the news is good, for reasons that I've given.
Yeah. All right. So, it's actually a good move, and again, we haven't had a lot of positive move. I think the last time we saw something that might be helpful was in 2017 when I think we all met for the hearing on FATCA that Mark Meadows spearheaded. That was so. This is really the next thing that I could think of. There's might have been some other things that were proposed, but they were really,
Well,
really,
there was a holding bill, right? At the end of
yeah.
2018, the holding bill, which was better than this Beyer thing for sure. I mean, it was,
Okay.
but it attacked. You see, here's the problem. Okay, all legislative attempts and proposals, other than perhaps seed, and this really needs to be understood, are not aimed at ending citizenship taxation at all. What they're aimed at is sort of making the prison of citizenship taxation a little more comfortable.
Yeah.
And what has to happen is that the U.S. has to join the rest of the world in no longer making taxation dependent on citizenship. Now, they can have a strong domicile thing the way Canada does, the way Australia does. But Canadians and Australians, regardless of their high tax burden, and both countries have departure taxes, allow their citizens to leave the country and not have to renounce U.S. citizenship. Now, going back to the Beyer video yesterday, the part that resonated with me most on sort of an emotional level, I mean, what I was describing so far was just more my mind, right? But, at the end of the thing, he frankly said that he completely understood why Americans were renouncing U.S. citizenship. And although he obviously wouldn't encourage it, he also said that, it made sense for a lot of them at certain times in their lives. And, that is just, I mean, that's why I think the video is likely to be pulled. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a big deal, John, that he said that. That's a big deal.
It is truly unbelievable. And, you've really got to tip your hat to this man for, having the courage, the honesty, and the integrity to say, yup, what's going on here is wrong. What's going on here is unreasonable. What's going wrong on here is irrational. What's going on is that it's causing divorces. What's going on is that it's causing people to renounce their U.S. citizenship. And all of these things are reasonable and understandable. That's heavy. That's really big.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big deal. What he said is a big deal. So yeah, so Mike has a comment, what grounds would the video be taken down on YouTube? Because it is a heck of an admission by an actual elected official that recognizes the true problem that most people say it doesn't even exist.
Yeah, I think that's right. By the way, I'd also like to inject a shout out to Rebecca and Democrats Abroad.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, for putting the
Thank you.
I think that given their role as part of the Democratic Party, I think that was an act of honesty, courageousness, and courageous.
Yeah. And Rebecca's actually been going around. I mean, she's been putting a lot of work into this. So
yeah.
yeah.
I mean, look, I mean, let's give credit where credit is due. Okay.
Sure.
The climate, I mean, this is so indescribably horrible. That the only people who really understand it are the people who have been impacted by it. It is so indescribably horrible. And it's almost impossible to get traction on this. So,
yeah.
It's not a good idea I think that the people who are working on this deserve praise, deserve thanks, and don't deserve a lot of criticism. I mean, let's keep the anger towards the U.S. government and the situation and not towards the people who,
sounds good,
in whatever ways, good, bad, flawed, brilliant, whatever, I mean, are trying to help the situation, right?
Yeah, at least they're, you know what, and I would say this, they're the ones putting light on it,
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think that those are now. Yeah, go ahead, Keith.
Yeah, here's a question I do have for you. How can we collectively, and this is going to come out insultingly, and I don't mean it this way at all. How can we collectively better educate Representative Beyer on the real meat and potatoes, nuts and bolts of citizenship-based taxation and the damage that it's doing across the world for American immigrants and accidental Americans, etc.? How can we ensure that he has all the information to really have a good, robust view of U.S. extraterritorial taxation?
Well, Keith,
what can we do collectively?
Yeah, the last 4 words or whatever of your question are the answer. I mean, that's what SEAT, which you're a member of, is all about.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree, but and that's good. That's great for SEAT, but on an individual basis. So, should American immigrants, accidental Americans, write Representative Beyer?
I would say so. I think
say
that would
thank you for this webinar, and then here's my story. Here's how it's ruining my life.
I have an idea on that. I actually have an idea. I'd be interested.
Okay.
Maybe people watching this podcast could respond. What about creating an organization to educate Congressman Beyer? An official organization of gratitude and education.
Yeah.
So that, and then all of the people, that becomes the clearinghouse for all of these people. This way it's completely independent of this nonsense of go vote, which
Right.
really pisses me off.
Yeah, and I'm gonna put a great way to get a message to a congressperson is to fax them. So here it is.
Seriously?
Yeah,
Anthony,
it actually is.
The old-fashioned way of faxing them.
Faxing, yeah.
Okay.
It actually is, yeah. So here's his fax number. If you want to reach out to him, just explain what's going on. It is in the super chat right now. You'll see that there. There's his fax number, and
that's good to know because I never knew that I mean, that's good to know, Anthony, because I never would have imagined faxing.
Yeah. No,
in this
faxes.
day and age would be a way.
Yeah, no, they have their
Yeah.
interns. They have their interns grabbing those faxes, and so that's a great way to do it. The emails can get a little filtered, and actually, he has a filter to only respond to people in his district. So that's the fax. Your
Yeah,
fax
they might get
works
into
are-
a spam or a junk.
Yeah. So that's a much better way. So and well-written letters will get response. And so I would say individually, just reaching out to him to say, hey, thanks a lot for your thing. Here's really what we need to do. I would say that's a great way for everybody to get in contact and sort of push them along. And we certainly actually have enough of an audience here to make a difference. That not everybody responds, and so and I think the rule is something like, what is it? Let's just see if I can show this here. So here it is. Okay, let me just here's the fax number. Let me just get this up for you guys so you guys can see it right there. You can write that down and send off something. And usually the general rule is like if you get one thing, there's like 100 people who believe it. So there's that's kind of the way they look. Like, okay, look, if I got 10 faxes on something, okay, that's a lot of people. If I get 100 faxes, which certainly everybody that would be no problem for the amount of people who are going to watch this video. That if we get 100, that's going to have a huge impact on what he would.
Yeah, and people telling their
perceive
stories on the damage that's being done.
Right. And I think this is the thing too, is here's somebody like, this is a great thing where you don't need to approach him like, you jerk, what are you doing? What are you doing? More like, hey, thank you so much. Really appreciate you actually understanding the issue. It's a breath of fresh air. Now let me talk about my particular issue and some of the other issues that we should really look at. And that would this channel alone, our audience alone, could make the difference to get him fired up to say, hey, look, I have the ammunition now, because he has the ammunition. He can go around and say, look, I'm getting all this feedback from people, and it's actually would be 100 faxes would be would be a lot, would really be a lot. So that's what I would say. Get out there, fax them your story.
What about this as a possibility? You hear always, well, fax your representative. I mean, or whatever maybe that's okay. But I think that it's worth thinking of addressing Congressman Beyer, all Americans abroad addressing Congressman Beyer, whether they contact their representative or not. But what I'm wondering is this, okay? Maybe Keith C. could put together, a template, sort of summarizing what Anthony had just described, because people aren't really necessarily good at this kind of stuff on their own. The second thing is that I wonder if there would be any point in putting together a central fax number where people sent all the faxes to one place they see, and then they were forwarded on. The only reason I mention that is that there's always the fear of any contact with the U.S. government, right? I won't do this,
right?
Anybody know I exist, sort of thing, or maybe maybe Seed or this group that
or it could just be or it could be just a central email that people send what they would normally send as a fax, and then it's printed out and faxed over to him.
Well, something like that. Anyway,
nowadays.
That's something
Well, I think personal. Usually the templates don't work because they know it's organized. So I always think the personal story is what I would suggest.
Well, if there's a template as far as just the beginning aspect, thanking him, etc. But then when somebody's telling their individual story, that's going to be hard to put in a template. They're going to have to just write their own story.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Well, we want to get so all right. So we have some action steps to do here. So we have some real action things. Thank you, Melvin. Thank you. So we have some action steps on this.
So Keith, you're in charge of this, this Facebook group, right? That has a fair.
Yeah.
It would seem to me that this is something that.
Well, there's 8,800 members in that group.
Well, come on, that's a massive group.
Yeah. So Keith, I think that this would be something where it'd be great for you to, because of that, take a huge lead role, in helping to organize this, right? But anyway,
And then here, I'm going to put a link to Keith's group on Facebook if you are not a member already. Putting it in the super chat right there. So, go here, and this is
And Anthony, where you're putting the fax number that you're sending out, is that going to be in permanently in the link when this goes up, or did you just put it in the chat?
So if
I'll
put it in the description. Once we're done with this, I'll put it in the description of this ad to say, hey, fax a letter of support to Don Beyer and explain your thing here. So I'll update the description in here so people watching.
Be nice, respectful.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And send your story.
He's really one of our best hopes here. So let's not.
Look, he's a good man, and he's doing the best he can with his understanding of what this situation is. Okay, I do believe that, and I think that, as I said before, a lot of this is educational. Okay, it's to help his understanding of the situation evolve to the point where he will understand that the only solution here is severing citizenship from tax residency. Okay.
It's just that right, and I think that's and my point that I would bring up is, hey, what's the purpose of FBAR penalties? And as you know, as Suzanne commented before, it's a $10,000. Where's her comment? She says, it's a $10,000. It's a $10,000 penalty. And $10,000 isn't, that's not a lot of money. Or it's a report. You could be. It's a report for if you have $10,000 more. $10,000 is nothing. I can't find her comment, but yeah. So I would say let's take a look at that too. Why are you? What's the deal with the changes to Title 31? Because it actually makes it look like penalties can be assessed easier. As I look at it, the penalties could be assessed easier. Where my concern was that this would be scored as a revenue raiser, and therefore a pay-go offset, just like FATCA. Now, Rebecca said tax bills don't get scored by the correct Congressional Budget Office, but FATCA did. And I'm not sure what the distinction is. So I'm just concerned. That's where my concern about his Tax Simplification Act is why are we making it easier for the IRS to assess penalties, and why are we? So that's my big concern. And this $10,000 threshold is really insane. It's totally insane. There's no terrorist, and that was the whole purpose of the FBAR was to crack down on international terrorism. And come on, whatever this is, it's an obsolete thing that can't possibly help. It only could terrorize people who have to file it and did. Now, we were, and I don't know if we still want to, we actually had some bonus content for you today, but I'm not sure if we can get to it in time because, John, you did, and maybe we want to do this next time, you did a great job explaining, and I could tease this a little bit for next time, because when we're talking about issues, complicated issues, well, this is something that's incredibly complicated that just came out, and it's a victory that we have. Hey, your tweet here is like, hey, you know what? There's special benefits of becoming a resident of France, which is you don't get hammered as much as you might somewhere else. And this is really the decision. We talked about this yesterday. The Christensen decision that came out of the Court of Federal Appeals, or Court of Federal Claims, which was a victory. I just don't know, John. Do you think we have the time to discuss it today, or do you want to give a?
Why don't we just do a 5-minute overview of some of the best?
Okay.
I think it's worth a separate.
All right. Yeah, it probably is worth it. So so you're here, and we want to give you the bonus, and we have a little bit of time. So we'll give you the streamlined version of Christian.
Very, very streamlined, just to sort of hopefully people will tune in next time we actually talk about this.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Here's the outline of, I guess, the full outline of what we'll talk about next time.
I can't see your screen. I've not been able to see your screen the whole time. I don't know.
You haven't been able to see my screen.
No, I don't know why that is. But
why is that going on? I don't know. I am sorry. Hopefully, our audience
critical for today, but.
All right. Well, so go ahead, John. What would you?
Okay. So, first of all, while we're in the business of giving shout outs, I think we need to give a shout out to the lawyers who actually
put
this together. And
Yeah, Pierce.
destroying
Here we
it.
go. Yeah, here he is.
Zimmerman was one of them, and Stewart.
Yeah.
Keith, you know this. Anyway, so
Yes.
I updated my post this morning to make sure their names are to get a shout out. But here's the bottom line, okay? In point form. As you know or may know, the U.S. has a separate tax called the net investment income tax, which is a separate tax imposed on investment income, that is interest, dividends, and capital gains that exceed a certain amount. Footnote, that would include the capital gain on the sale of your home. Okay, by the way, okay, for those who think it might not apply to them. Okay, the second point is this: the way it's written into the Internal Revenue Code very, very specifically is written in so that one cannot use foreign tax paid as a tax credit to offset the net investment income tax. So one way to look at it is that it's essentially a US 3.8% tax charge, right, on this foreign income that you've already paid tax to in the other country. So it is pure legislative double taxation for Americans abroad. I will repeat, pure legislative double taxation for Americans abroad. Okay, and by the way, this is more change you can believe in from Mr. Fatka, etc. Okay, just to be clear on this. All right, now, when you look at a standard tax treaty, and they're not all the same, people say, well, the purpose of the tax treaty is to avoid double taxation. I got to tell you that is one of the most outrageous lies, okay, that you can imagine.
Thank you.
The first point I would make is the saving clause in the U.S. tax treaty is used to anchor and reinforce double taxation by preserving the right of the U.S. tax.
Yep.
The second point I would make is that the standard clause in all the tax treaties says that the tax credit is limited in accordance with the law of the local country. So what that really means is that if it's not allowed under the Internal Revenue Code as a tax credit, that it can't be used as a tax credit. So the starting point then for the net investment income tax is that foreign tax credits cannot be used to offset it in terms of almost every tax treaty in the world. But, okay, France has a very different and special tax treaty. It's not easy to understand, but the bottom line is this, okay, that because of another clause in the double taxation article of the treaty that says, here's something additional that applies specifically to if you're a U.S. citizen residing in France. So this is a separate clause.
Okay.
In the France-U.S. tax treaty. Now, what the court did here was read this. So that first it agreed that pursuant to the general clause that's in all the tax treaties, no, foreign tax credits cannot be used to offset the net investment income tax. But it went further and said, but now we're going to look at this second clause. And we're going to read this second clause completely independently. And guess what? When we read this second clause that applies specifically to U.S. citizens residing in France, under this clause, okay, the American citizen living in France can use the French tax paid as a foreign tax credit specifically to offset all U.S. taxes, including the net investment income tax. So the end for now. But
wow,
what you need to understand is that this works clearly. Well, by the way, it can be appealed, and I believe the IRS will appeal it. The decision itself is 92 pages. I tried to get through it yesterday. I could not. It is not only is it 92 pages, but you can multiply that by 10 for the factor of footnotes and cases that it cites. I mean, it could be a law school course, this case. All right, so it's there's just so much going on, but they will appeal, and we'll see. Right, we'll see, because they're going to appeal on the basis that the general rule that says the tax credits are limited by the Internal Revenue Code should apply to this other paragraph as well. That's going to be the basis of their appeal. Will it succeed? I really don't know. But the bottom line is this, okay? Country like Norway and Tunisia, I mentioned them because those are tax treaties I've looked at very recently. They don't have anything like this second type of clause. If you're in Norway or Tunisia, you're going to be subject to double taxation. Okay, France, no. Not so sure about Canada. I think there's a possibility that Canadians may be able to, get a refund of net investment income tax they paid. But in a general sense, I mean, here we go again. Not only are Americans abroad taxed more punitively than resident Americans, but the extent of the injustice actually depends on which country they live in. I mean, this is just, it is so insane. It is so stupid. It is so unjust and irrational and unfair. And that's why we know it's pure Americanness, because only the United States could operate with this level of
And we'll be proud of it too. And so, I mean, I think this ties in perfectly with what we were just talking about sharing the story, because in this case, and really a shout out, because this was the case. I think what we were talking about, $4,000 in taxes in this case.
Yeah, if you could put my post on the screen, I did.
I do have it up. I'm
yeah. I can't remember their names, and that but
the
no
Christiansons. Yeah.
Anybody? Okay. Just
So let me see if I can find it here. But yeah, it was not a lot of tax, and so here's the thing, and this is, and just like with Moore's. Well, who's the person who can find the attorney to go through all of this, to fight this tooth and nail and have the time and energy to investigate and push back? Because as it is now, the Court of Appeals ruled in favor in a way that's adverse to what the IRS said.
U.S.
The IRS said this.
U.S. Court of Claims.
What's that?
U.S.
Court of Claims. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Go to the
U.S.
court.
Yeah, sorry. It will go to the and then it'll probably go to the D.C. Circuit, I imagine. And so this is such a complicated issue to figure out. Well, do you have a tax professional who can figure this out?
No. The answer is no. Okay.
Right?
No.
Right? It's like, well, no one would have this answer, because if you went to a tax professional, they're like, oh, no, you got to do it because we don't have a decision that says you can't. So you need to find an attorney who's willing to take your case, pay him, or maybe he's going to do this, for a discounted rate, but, through the charity of his heart, and finding someone who actually push this to get this result, just so that you don't have to pay your $4,000. And that's just not realistic. And so, as it is now, we have the IRS going around saying that the law is one thing. Well, we don't know what the law is, because many issues aren't litigated because people don't have the ability to litigate. It's like, oh, it's just not worth it to hire someone. I'll just pay the tax and let them, ruin me, because, I don't have the years and the tens of thousands of dollars to push back on the IRS. It's not like, you get attorney's fees paid. It's not like there's anything for you except, okay, you have, you don't have to pay this tax. And is that enough of an incentive for everyone to fight back? And that's what puts everybody overseas. Well, everybody overseas and anyone with overseas investments in the same position, where there's not the accountability, because no one could really afford to hold the IRS accountable when they make these interpretations of vague laws in ways that benefit them and work against the American people. So I think, this is exactly the kind of thing to bring up to Representative Beyer. When you fax him, if you're just showing up, on the podcast, we discussed Representative Beyer's video that he did with Rebecca abroad, and we've concluded it actually is a good thing that he's doing. While he might have flaws in some parts of the Tax Simplification Act, and it really doesn't go far enough, it actually doesn't simplify anything. At least he's somebody who has a grasp on the reality of the ground. And so we've decided that, really the best course of action for us to take is for people to fax him the personal story, to say, thank you so much for your interest in this. And here's my story. And for a lot of people out there, and I'm not, you could just say, hey, look, I have a hard time figuring out what applies, because these tax treaties don't really stop double taxation. And, you have your savings clause, which will, gives, really negates much of the treaties. And treaties are so difficult to understand, and they're time consuming for me to go through, like, okay, let me take a look at this. I like to deal with things I already know the answer to. That's really it. I don't like finding new answers, because it's so time consuming to go through these treaties. And that is a significant issue, is that it becomes that important that you're whether or not you're poor or rich depends on which country you're living in. It really does. And you didn't know that, And you had no idea to know that. And so talk about a nasty surprise. So I think that's something to include in there. Keith, would you say this is something? And didn't you ask me a treaty question just the other? You called me. Hey, Anthony, I got a treaty question for you. Did you just call me with one?
I do. I did. I
Yeah.
did. Somebody was moving from France, which has a treaty with the United States, to Algeria, where they don't have a treaty with the United States. And my question was, well, as a result of no treaty, what is that going to look like for that American overseas? You see what I mean? What's the same and what's not the same?
Right. And without going too much into the various aspects of this particular person, said, okay, what's the general thing? You ask, well, what's the general thing? I'm like, well, where I see the tax treaties being most consequential, and this was a sale of a house, we're really here, is in retirement. Those are where I see, France is a good place to retire. UK, Australia, no. A lot of places not so good. Even if there's a tax treaty, it might not be so good. So that's really where I see the treaties coming into benefit. And those are the issues that I'm looking into most of the time. For most of my clients, those are the things that we look into. And very vastly different. I mean, vastly different treatments. And then there's also what will also happen, depending on what treaty country you're in. You may have a reporting form due, like a 3520A, with a $10,000 penalty, or in a form 3520 for any distributions, and your penalty exposure can be massive. And on the 3520, it's actually a percentage. So it actually kind of works like an FBAR penalty, an additional. And what triggered what triggered your requirement to file it was a tax treaty that you couldn't understand, nor could 98% of the population. I mean, they're very difficult to understand. And why are we throwing that sort of demand? I mean, that's a huge demand on people to figure out what you need to file, because there's penalties for filing things you don't need to file as well. So that's really what I see is, that would be a great, I think this would be a great venue for people to express, hey, look, I have a very difficult situation and I can't figure it out which way I am. Maybe you want to sit down with me and go over the treaty one by one, which of course nobody would want to do. So I think probably a good.
Nobody would want to do Anthony. Nobody would want to do Anthony, but the thing is that being proactive like that could save you a lot of money in the long run.
Yeah.
So one has to take a look at the future value of doing that today and getting familiarizing yourself with somebody that has an expertise like you to sit down. You know what I mean? So you got to take a look. Because cheap is expensive. So if you're going to be cheap in the initial, it could really bite you in the bum later on.
Yeah.
Whatever.
And I know John can't see it, but I'm grabbing some of the quotes from the opinion, and I look at this is so dense to read. It is just so dense to read. That I put a 10x by the amount of pages to try to figure out what this all means. And
I promise you, no lay person could read that decision and have even the vaguest idea what it was saying.
Absolutely right. Absolutely. So I mean, right. I mean, no wonder people want a divorce over this, because what are you getting into? We don't know. And then, and it's still like, we don't know, and it's like, there's a victory right now for the Christiansons, but we don't know what's going to happen. Maybe, it'll be overruled. And again, I would say this though, just in closing on this, and we'll probably discuss this more in depth next week. But there is, if you are impacted by this, if you have paid taxes, the Court of Federal Claims gave everybody extended time to file a claim for refund until April 15th, 2024. So it is something I would say you would want to get going on that. And if you are thinking of doing that, I guess I should throw out my email. If that's something that you're looking for help, that's something that we help people get their refunds. You can email me aparent@irsmedic.com if you have anything like that you're looking to do. I think we did a good job of covering everything today. Keith, any final words?
I think it's going to be important, and I will think about this offline, obviously. The best way for people to contact Representative Beyer in a very respectful way so they can tell their stories,
Yeah.
whether it be through fax or whatever. I think that's going to be very important. And I will send out a message in some form or fashion to the 8,800 people in the American Expatriates group, because I can send it out to everyone so they all get it.
Yeah.
And see how many people will send something to Beyer. I mean,
All
even if
right,
there's 20 people do it, that's a big
yeah,
deal.
no, we have a huge, we have a great audience here. We all have the same, we all have the same interests here. So we have a huge audience. We could really make a difference. If you're watching this and if you're on the Facebook group, you totally make a difference. And by the way, if you are considering, a lot of people are considering entering the U.S. tax system. They haven't been, they're accidental Americans, or maybe they've not really been doing things for a while. Oftentimes it's better to talk to someone who isn't an attorney. And Keith has been helping out people make the right decisions in a way that I really can't. I really help people who've already made the decision. Okay, I'm going to enter the tax system, or I'm going to correct something.
Yeah.
But helping you get to that decision.
And if I may add, Anthony, I also talk with people who need to discern whether to renounce or not, and what that's going to look like. So that's also another aspect.
You could really reach out to Keith. He can help you
and
out.
then send them on to John.
There you go, right on. Yeah. And so go to US_overseas_advocate@outlook.com. John, you're concluding. Anything concluding you'd like to say?
There's a lot of justifiable anger out here, and that would include me. Okay, there's a lot of justifiable anger, but can't remember, was it Benjamin Franklin who said, if we don't hang together, we will surely hang separately. Okay, and this is a moment for doubling down on education, seeing the the bright spots of it's sometimes a dark, dismal situation, and doing what can be done. I mean, that's the first point I would make generally, and that includes everybody. The second point, though, is this: that I've been involved in this for an awful lot of years now, from many different vantage points of view, including the advocacy, lobbying, and there is no question that this is an important goal, but it is going to take a good deal of time. Those who are 40 plus should renounce and get out, okay? Because the risk of things happening on the road to salvation, so to speak, I think are so great that if they have a second citizenship, I think they should move on. Think of themselves as retired citizens. But, the risk of remaining American in this environment is huge.
Right on. And if you are thinking of renouncing, if you've made the decision, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to John.
I'm not trying to market my services. I mean, sure, if you want to, but I'm not.
I'll do it for you. Hey, you know what, John? You're providing a lot of value here. You're providing a lot of education. You've been helping me so much. I'm going to promote you. I'm sorry.
Okay,
that's just the way it's going to be.
Right,
that's just the way it's going to be.
That people should renounce. It's because the situation's gotten too. I thank you. Appreciate that, Anthony. But I just want to make it clear, okay, that my concluding comments are not to be interpreted as some kind of promotional, thing. Okay. I mean, this is just where this is for people.
Well, and I think any fan of this channel knows that you're a genuine person who truly concerned. And so this is really, and I think that's really the reason why I recommend John so much to help you out, because he has true integrity, he has true concern, and he has an understanding of the law that very few people do. And in fact, I'm not sure if anybody else does. To tell you the truth, he's very unique, and I'm really happy that Keith, John, and I have been able to do this, because I think we've been able to get a fantastic message out and help get some real change going. And here it is. And I think we got a great opportunity here now, guys. We got to do our part. We got to do our part and reach out to the person who says, "Hey, look, I'm looking to help." Representative Beyer says, hey, look, I'm looking to help. Okay, well, let's do our part. We can't expect him to read our minds. It'd be nice if he could. Well, I don't know about that. So let's reach out there and get some true advocacy going there. Let's stand up for ourselves. And we are. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you. And I thought it was a great show today. I really appreciate it. It was kind of short notice. I appreciate. We had a fantastic audience, by the way. And I think it's showing how much people are really concerned about doing it. Oh, one final question. This is for you, John. Casey, is it difficult to retire from being an American? Is the process difficult?
To retire if you're an American?
Right. Is it difficult to retire from being an American? Upgrading.
Yeah, okay. I'll give you an answer to that question.
Okay.
I mean, to some extent, as a lawyer, what comes first. It depends, right? But it depends on, I think, a number of factors, including, first of all, what country you live in. I mean, we use Australia as an extreme where they're not going to tax your superannuation is mandatory. They won't tax in Australia. The U.S. will tax it. So that's a situation, where it's extremely difficult. The problem fundamentally is this, right? That the U.S. imposes incredibly punitive taxation on non-U.S. investment vehicles. These are called PFICs, and a lot of Canadians, for example, use Canadian-controlled private corporations as their retirement pensions. And these are the things that are really, really punished, hard by the U.S. tax code. I would also point, one of the things that a lot of people I'm getting calls on now, or more and more, are people who, they're in retirement, but they're worried about dying, And, how do you manage the whole estate planning issue as an American? I mean, there's clearly no benefit to dying as an American, especially if you deal with other countries. So, this is something that I think, I've been doing this for so long now that I'm actually seeing the demographic age with me, right? Where they start out, not thinking about retirement, not thinking about death, and now they're thinking about retiring and death. And, and you see these problems from a completely different vantage point. Being an American takes an awful lot of time. You got to have a full-time lawyer, and it's very expensive. And it really, rationally, it's just hard to imagine how it could be worth the risk at this point for people who have the opportunity to get out.
All right. Well, thank you for that. All right. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Really, really enjoyed it today. I think we got a lot of far, and we have something positive to do. We all have homework to do. So let's get to it. We are I want to tease something. We are going to be covering the Moore versus US live stream. So be sure to subscribe and turn on your notifications so we're going to be going live at 9:30 on December 5th. And so we'll have our commentary on that. We've been discussing that case inside and out, and I'm convinced it's one of the most important Supreme Court cases of all time. That's for sure. And the most important tax case of all time. And it will really determine what United States of America becomes. If the transition tax is upheld, there is no bound to however the government wants to tax. It can tax you for things you've never earned. It can tax you for wealth you don't even have, tax you for income you don't even have, just tax you. And put you in a situation where you have a bill that you simply can't pay. If there is a victory, depends how it rolls out, but we could actually see some meaningful changes that would at least put some sort of actual boundary on what the IRS can do to us, and that would be helpful. With that, I want to thank Keith Redmond and John Richardson for joining me today. This is Anthony Parent of IRS Medic, and thanks so much for watching and participating. See you soon.